Hi, this is Joe with Soft Water Supply. Today we're going to show you how to assemble your water softener. First off, your softener probably came in a lot of different components. You've got tanks and control valves and resin, and so we'll show you how to get that together. The first thing you'll notice is that you have a riser that fits into your tank. This riser essentially is a tube that sits down inside. Inside the tank, you're going to put the resin. Now you'll have water enter your home or your business. The water is going to flow down through the tank around that tube, and when it gets down to the bottom of the tank, you've got a screen here or a basket. That basket is where the soft water goes. So your water is going to come down through the resin, get softened. Soft water will go into the basket, and then that soft water is going to travel up the inside of the tube into your control valve and into your home or business. So the first thing that we'll do in assembling our water softener today, we're going to put the riser down inside the mineral tank or the resin tank. You'll notice that my riser sits really close to being flush with the top collar on the tank. You want that to be flush or maybe just a little below the top of the tank. If your riser sticks up above the top of the tank, you can damage the basket at the bottom and cause problems with the valve up top. And so you always want to make sure that it sits down there. Now in this particular tank model and a lot of the models, you'll have a little divot at the bottom right in the center of the tank, and that riser will sit right down in there neatly. It should be cut to length already, but for some reason if your riser's a little long, they can be trimmed. You just want to make sure that it stays really smooth with no burrs or anything, because you're going to have an O-ring on the valve that's going to fit right around that riser nice and tight. So you don't want to have burrs that will tear that O-ring. So we've got the riser on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a cover on the riser so that we don't get resin into our riser when we're filling our resin tank. So the way that I do that, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Here at softwatersupply.com, we typically don't do it this way, but this will probably be the easiest way for you at home. And what I'm going to do is cover the riser with a piece of fairly thick plastic. This is just from a thick garbage bag, a new garbage bag. I'm going to wrap it with a piece of tape. And that'll make it so that the plastic stays on there good. We won't get any resin into our riser, and it'll be easy to remove when we get our resin in the tank. So I'm going to seat that down there good. I'm checking it, it's below the level there of the top of the tank. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a funnel on here. Now you can buy these funnels at softwatersupply.com. They're really convenient to have. If you don't have some sort of a funnel, it's going to be really tough to fill resin through this little hole. You'll just about have to do it with a little measuring cup or something really small. I have seen people make funnels out of cardboard and all sorts of things. There's a lot of creative ways to get a funnel. But this is one of the nicest, and it'll be the fastest way and easiest way to fill up that tank. So I'll grab my resin here and we'll get started filling up. Okay, so when I start pouring the resin, I want to be careful that that riser doesn't lift up. So I'm going to start out pouring fairly slow here. Sometimes it's convenient to get an extra hand from somebody to hold that riser down. So we'll start out pretty slow. Let's go ahead, we'll take a look at the riser, and it looks like with that resin in there, our riser's still settled nicely on the bottom of the tank. It's not over the top, and so we should be pretty good there. I can start to pour the resin this time a little quicker. Still being careful not to move that riser too much. If it lifts off the bottom of the tank, we'll have to dump the tank and start over. Now, a lot of times, what you'll run into is that sometimes the resin gets a little wet and it'll actually stick and fill your funnel. It doesn't flow as well as this resin is flowing right now. If you have wet resin that has a little more moisture content and it sticks in the funnel, it might be helpful to have somebody shake the funnel while you pour, or just pour a little bit at a time and shake it. Be careful not to spill a lot on the floor because it does get pretty slippery. That resin basically is like walking on marbles if you spill a bunch. So Now this particular unit is a fairly small system. It's a 32,000 grain system, and so it only took 1 cubic foot of resin to fill that tank. Now what I'll do is I'll take my plastic off, and we've got our tank there. So when you sell a lot of systems, it'll save people money if they don't install that. But at softwatersupply.com, we think that you should always have that. It'll protect you from accidents like having resin through your pipes or anything like that. The basket installs, you can see there's a little groove there and little tabs inside the valve. If you just turn that basket until it seats and then give it a twist, it'll lock into place. So I've got that basket locked into place on the bottom of the valve. Now I'm going to put the valve on the tank. So we'll line it up. You can feel typically when that riser slips past the O-ring in the bottom of the valve. Then you can kind of start screwing that on. So there it goes, it just dropped down. Now I'm going to slowly start to thread the valve on the tank. If it's not threading on, you might want to back it up a little bit until it drops onto the thread straight. I always start out really slow so that I don't cross threads, and just make sure that it's going nice and smooth. So, and it's going on the tank really well. At this point, if you have a lot of tension and it's not wanting to go on, stop and back it up and find out why it's not going on the tank easily. And right about there, it's getting a little snug. I'm starting to get a little bit tight. So I'm going to take, and at this point, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a turn, about a quarter turn. And that's it. You shouldn't have to crank on that, or you could split your tank. I'll show you how to install the bypass. Now every model is going to be a little bit different. The non-electronic 5600 has a different mechanical meter on the back. Everything's going to be a little different, but basically you're going to want to get your bypass installed on the system. Now I have a few different bypass options on this Fleck 5600 model. This bypass assembly, the plastic one, is standard. It comes with the unit. There's actually, you can snap on connectors, either 3/4 inch or 1 inch, that'll connect to your plumbing, and so you'll have a threaded adapter there. You just need to choose on the website which adapters you want to use. This bypass here, you can see it already has your threaded adapters, and it can be purchased in either 3/4 or 1 inch. This bypass, the stainless steel one, is a little more heavy duty. We do recommend that if you have a lot of sand in your water or debris, that's going to cause problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disconnect here. You can use either a flat screwdriver for these screws on the side. I'm actually going to flip this over. If you use a 1/4 inch nut driver, sometimes it's a little faster and easier. So I'm going to pull these clips here. And with this style of clip, it actually has to come clear out. Some of the other clips don't have the little lock at the bottom. They've just got a screw in the middle, and those ones can just loosen up. But I'm going to go ahead and pull these clips. Okay, and we'll put our bypass on the back. Now, a lot of times at this point, you can kind of decide you don't want to put your plumbing in here and torque on it when you're trying to tighten down plumbing. And so, depending on how you do this, you can leave it at this point and fit it up to your plumbing, and then plumb it in. And then when you make those attachments, pull your bypass off. Make the attachments, do any soldering that you need to do, make sure that any soldering that's done isn't close to the plastic joints. and then you can snap your system back into the bypass. But regardless of how you do this, just be careful not to solder near plastic or to put a lot of torque on that bypass when you're doing it, or you could break your meter. So I'll go ahead and never forget to put these clips in. If you forget to put the clips back on before you turn your water on, you're going to have a watery mess. So just remember to put your clips back on. There's one. Now these screws don't need to be overly tight. Just good and snug is all we need to do. So I'll have my second set of hands hand it back to me. Okay, so a little snug on there is okay. They don't need to be overly tightened. So there we go. We've got our system together. You've got your plumbing coming into it, and we can talk about that in an installation video later on. But there you go. Your resin tank is ready to go and to be installed. Now, the other things that you'll notice here with the resin tank are that you have a fitting here. This is where the tubing will install from your brine tank. There are several different types of tubing fittings that will be used on water softeners. As a general rule though, your brine tank fitting is going to be 3/8 inch line on most systems, most residential systems. On this particular model, you just slide that over. There's a little ferrule that was actually inside there. That little ferrule is going to fit right over the end of the tubing. I've got a tube support there to keep from crushing that tubing down. So you have your tube support and your ferrule and your nut. You'll make sure that's seated clear into the fitting, and then start that tightening by hand. Okay, at that point you'll want to get a wrench on that fitting. You never want to overly tighten anything on a water softener, just because you can cause cracking and problems. So I'm going to get this old crescent wrench on here and just snug up that fitting good and snug. On this particular 5600 model, you see you've got a drain fitting back here. Now you may be using a barbed fitting where your drain line will just push onto that fitting, or you may be using something like a PEX fitting or even a copper fitting there. Typically your system will include a barbed fitting, and so you can push 1/2 inch drain line right onto that fitting. Put a little Teflon on that fitting, maybe 3 or 4 wraps of Teflon, and snug it up in there. Again, not over tightening. Okay. This is our brine tank. We'll show you how to hook the brine tank up. Basically, you'll have a lid on the inside of your brine well here. Inside the brine well, this is the brine well here. You've got a float on here on this valve, so that if your brine tank ever gets too full of water, the float should shut it off. Now, with that being said, there is a safety overflow elbow here on the brine tank. What that elbow is for, it just goes through the side of the tank. If the water level ever comes up too full inside your brine tank, the water would drip out of this overflow elbow. You should install a tube on the elbow that can just be gravity fed to a floor drain or somewhere outside where it would be safe to drain in the event that this ever overfilled. It's very, very, very infrequently that we see an overfilling brine tank, because you have the safety float, and your control valve also should stop the flow of water through the brine line as soon as it's done filling. But just to be safe, you'll want to install the overflow tubing on this elbow. So now the way that you connect your brine line to the salt tank is you've got a fitting inside here. That fitting is where your tubing connects. So you'll want to install it there, tighten that fitting down really good and snug, and make sure that once you get it as hand tight as you can, maybe give it another 1/4 turn or so, just with a pair of channel locks or a small wrench, and snug it up good and tight. Now don't crank down on it with that wrench over and over, or you could crack the fittings, but you want to do that. And make sure that when you do that, that you have your tube support in place to support the end of that pipe so that it doesn't compress. There are a couple different methods of connecting the brine tank to the float. This is probably the most popular. Some models will have a piece called a bulkhead fitting here. With the bulkhead fitting, basically it'll look a little bit like this. It's got a stem on the end here. The bulkhead fitting, what it does is it attaches for you. It's already pre-attached inside the salt tank, and so it will stick through the side of the tank. If I can line it up right, it'll install right into there. And so when you look in your brine tank, you'll have this fitting, the stem there, and the way that you attach to this bulkhead fitting is just to take your piece of tubing, put it in there, and push it good and snug. If you feel that tubing seat all the way to the bottom, that should be connected fine. That's the quick connect, and some of the models have that. Okay, here's our completely assembled water softener, ready for the installation. You can leave the brine tank disconnected until you get all your plumbing and things done. We just wanted to put that in this video so that you see how to hook those together. You can watch our other videos and we can show you a little bit about how to install the system. If you have questions, feel free to contact us at support@softwatersupply.com, and we'd be happy to answer your questions there for the installation of your Soft Water Supply water softener. If you have other questions about how to assemble your water softener, feel free to post them below, and we'll try to answer any questions that you have about the assembly of your water softener. Thanks for watching our video at softwatersupply.com. We look forward to getting you and your family or your business into great soft water.